name is Monica Bennett. I'm 28 years old, and I used to believe that love was about showing up, being dependable, patient, the kind of person someone could build a future with. I thought that was enough, until the night the man I loved looked me in the eye and told me I was too safe. James and I met in college. He was the kind of man who made a room feel smaller when he walked into it, charismatic, a little reckless, all charm and energy. I wasn't like that. I was quieter, the type who color codes her notes and plans her week in advance. He used to tease me for it, in that affectionate way people do when they admire what they don't understand. "You make life so organized," he'd say, laughing, as I corrected his essay formatting or reminded him of deadlines. I thought we balanced each other out. Fast forward 4 years. We'd both graduated and were figuring out what real adulthood meant. I had a stable job as a systems analyst at a mid-sized firm. Not glamorous, but consistent, steady growth, health insurance, stability. James was in marketing. He loved the freedom, the thrill of chasing new contracts, hopping from one creative gig to the next. He said he hated routine. It made him feel trapped. I didn't mind being the anchor. I believed in partnership, the kind that meant taking turns carrying the weight. So when James's contracts were slow, I picked up extra freelance work. When his dream of starting a digital agency seemed impossible, I supported it. I told myself, this is what love looks like. You sacrifice because the future together will be worth it. But lately, I'd begun to feel like a background character in my own life. The small things started to shift. He'd scroll through social media and sigh at photos of couples backpacking across Europe, women sipping wine under fairy lights in places we couldn't afford. They look so alive, he'd murmur, and I'd smile weakly, pretending not to notice that I wasn't included in that image of being alive. When I'd suggest weekend getaways or simple dates, he'd wrinkle his nose. "That sounds safe," he'd say. "Don't you ever want to do something wild? Just quit everything. Travel. Take risks." I'd laugh it off the way I always did. "We'll get there when it makes sense." He'd roll his eyes. "You and your plans, Monica. Someday doesn't exist for people who actually live." It stung, but I brushed it aside. He'd always been impulsive. I thought that was just his way of dreaming. Then came the late nights, the new friends from work, the phone he'd turn face down every time a notification lit up. I told myself not to be paranoid. Trust was what adults did right, and I loved him. God. I loved him enough to explain away every red flag. When I brought up the idea of us moving in together, I did it gently over dinner. "We're practically living at each other's places already," I said. "We could save money, maybe even start looking at something bigger down the line." He froze mid-bite. "Move in," he repeated, voice flat. "That feels heavy." I blinked. "Heavy, James? We've been together 4 years." He put his fork down, avoiding my eyes. "I just don't think I'm ready for that. It sounds—" He paused, searching for the word, then said it like a knife, slipping between ribs. "Boring." I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. "Boring." He sighed. "Monica, you're great, you really are. But you're so predictable. Everything has to fit in a plan. You play it safe. I want passion, adventure. I want to feel alive." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "And I don't make you feel that way." He hesitated just long enough to tell me the truth, hurt more than he meant it to. "There's someone else," he said finally, voice low. "Nothing serious, but she gets me. She makes me feel free." The room tilted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You're seeing someone else." "It's not like that," he said quickly. "We're just talking." But it made me realize something. I don't want the life we're building. I don't want this. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. "What is this, James?" He looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and irritation. "You're safe. You're convenient. You're the kind of woman men settle down with when they're done chasing what they really want. But I'm not done yet." The words hit harder than any slap could. Safe, convenient, boring. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why I wasn't enough after all the years I'd given him. But instead, something inside me went still cold, precise clarity, cutting through the pain. "If that's how you feel," I said quietly, "then I won't stand in your way." He blinked. "That's it. You're not even going to fight for us." I met his gaze. "No, because you already made your choice." His mouth opened, then closed again. For once, he didn't have a clever line. I stood, picked up my coat, and walked to the door. My hands were shaking, but my voice didn't waver when I said, "You wanted freedom, James. I hope you find it. You." Then I walked out, not slamming the door, not crying, just leaving, because sometimes silence is the only power you have left. The night air was cold when I stepped outside. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't go back. As I stood under the streetlight, I realized something painful and true: being safe might not be what he wanted, but someday someone else would see it for what it really was: loyalty, consistency, love. And that night, as I walked away from the man who called me boring, I promised myself one thing: if he ever came back, I'd never be the safe choice again. The days after I left James's apartment felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life and was watching someone else's heartbreak on mute. My apartment, once filled with his laughter and late-night conversations, felt cavernous. I'd wake up expecting to see his jacket on the chair, his toothbrush by the sink. But it was just me, a ghost of a life that no longer existed. The first few nights I barely slept. I'd reach for my phone every few minutes, hoping he'd text, terrified he actually would. But the screen stayed blank. The silence was cruel, but it was also an answer. When I finally opened social media, my chest tightened. There he was, James, smiling in photos with a new woman. Her name was Chloe. Blonde, carefree, the kind of girl who looked like she'd never had to plan a thing in her life. The captions were what hurt the most. Finally living my best life. Surround yourself with people who make you feel alive. People commented hearts and fire emojis. Mutual friends left compliments like, "You two are perfect together." I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Perfect together. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I set it down quietly, my hands trembling. I refused to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much it hurt. At work, I kept my head down, smiled when I needed to, pretended I was fine. But every time someone mentioned his name, even casually, "Hey, didn't your boyfriend work in marketing?" my stomach nodded. I'd force a smile and say, "Ex-boyfriend," then excuse myself to the bathroom before the tears came. I used to think heartbreak was loud, all shouting, crying, dramatic music in the background. But it wasn't. It was quiet. It was brushing your teeth alone and realizing you don't need to buy 2 toothbrushes anymore. It was deleting old playlists and finding his shirt still mixed in with your laundry. It was silence so thick it felt alive. Weeks turned into months. I started walking home from work instead of taking the train, anything to keep from sitting still. I picked up extra projects, joined a yoga class, even started running, though I hated running. I told myself it was healing, but really I just didn't want to think. And yet in those long, empty evenings, I couldn't help remembering the small things: how he'd make me tea when I was sick, how he used to brush my hair away from my face when we watched movies. Those memories cut the deepest. Not because I missed him, but because I missed the idea of who I thought he was. One night, I ran into a mutual friend at a coffee shop. She hesitated before speaking, her voice low. "Hey, Monica, I heard about you and James. I'm sorry. He's been seeing Chloe for a while. Guess it's serious." I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. "Good for him," I said simply. But that night when I got home, I broke down. Not because I wanted him back, but because I finally realized the truth: he'd already replaced me, long before he told me I wasn't enough. After that, I decided I was done crying for someone who couldn't see my worth. I deleted his number, blocked his accounts. Not out of anger, but because I needed peace. It wasn't some grand transformation, not at first. Healing came in fragments, small, fragile victories. The first time I laughed again, really laughed, was during lunch with a coworker who made a joke about my disastrous attempts at cooking. The sound startled me. It had been so long since I'd heard it. The first time I didn't think about him all day, I realized only at night and smiled. Bit by bit, I began piecing myself together. The silence that once felt suffocating began to feel calm, safe, mine. Months passed. My skin cleared. My smile returned. My world stopped revolving around someone who had already walked away. And one night, as I sat scrolling through my phone before bed, I saw another post from James, him and Chloe on a beach somewhere, holding drinks, laughing under the sun. The caption read, "With the woman of my dreams." I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. Not bitterly, just softly, because I finally understood I wasn't the one who lost. For the first time in a long while, I felt light, free. Maybe he did find the woman of his dreams, but I was starting to find something better myself. That night I went to sleep without checking my phone again, and for once I didn't dream about him. The next morning, when I opened my messages, there was a new text waiting for me. "James, hey, been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long, quiet moment. My lips curved into a faint, almost pitying smile. After everything he'd said, after calling me safe, convenient, boring, now he wanted to talk. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. The silence between us had finally changed sides. I didn't reply to James's message. Not that day. Not the next. Not even when he followed up with, "I owe you an apology. Can we meet for coffee?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard once or twice. Part of me wanted to say something, anything, even just why now, but I didn't. I had already spent years explaining myself to him, trying to be understood. Silence, I decided, would speak louder. A week later, my friend Mia sent me a voice note, her tone bubbling with barely contained gossip. "Monica, you are not going to believe this. Remember Chloe James's dream girl?" Yeah, turns out the dream came with a nightmare. He caught her texting one of his friends. Apparently she'd been seeing him for weeks. The same guy she used to call James's work twin. I listened, half smiling, half sad. There it was, Karma knocking quietly on the door. Mia continued, "He's been posting all these vague quotes lately. You know, the classic breakup kind. Healing takes time. Not everyone you lose is a loss. Blah, blah." I laughed. It wasn't cruel, it was relief. For months I'd replayed his words in my head, wondering if I really was too safe, too predictable, too boring. But now I saw him for what he truly was, restless, chasing the illusion of excitement and always looking for the next high. People like James confuse peace for emptiness. They think calm is the same as boring. They don't realize it takes real strength to stay steady in a world addicted to chaos. By the time his healing posts turned into photos of solo vacations and cryptic captions like, "Learning to love myself again," I had already stopped checking. My life had shifted in ways I didn't expect. I'd been offered a promotion at work lead analyst for a new project. The old me might have hesitated, worried about balancing the workload. The new me said yes without blinking. I started mentoring junior employees, taking the space I'd once shrunk myself to fit into. On weekends, I joined a hiking group. The first trail nearly killed me. I tripped twice and lost my water bottle halfway up the mountain. But at the summit, wind in my hair, sunlight cutting through the mist, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. And it had nothing to do with anyone else. Every now and then, people would ask about James. I'd just shrug. We were different people. It didn't work out. And that was true. The thing about heartbreak is that it burns everything down, your illusions, your expectations, your version of yourself that existed just to please someone else. But once the ashes settle, you get to decide what grows back. For me, it was independence, confidence, and a quiet kind of joy that didn't need validation from anyone. Still, I won't pretend I didn't think about him. Sometimes when I saw a couple laughing at a cafe or a movie trailer about second chances, I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, if he ever regretted it. One evening after work, my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from an unknown number. "I miss you. Please don't ignore me." No name, but I didn't need one. I recognized his tone, that same blend of guilt and entitlement. I didn't respond. But that weekend, as I walked past my old favorite coffee shop, I saw James sitting by the window alone. He looked smaller somehow, less polished, like someone who'd been trying too hard to convince the world he was fine. Our eyes met for a split second before I turned away. He didn't follow me, but later that night, another message arrived. "Can we talk just once? I need to see you." I didn't answer that one either. A few days later, Mia told me, "Guess who quit his job, James?" Apparently he said he was too stressed. Chloe moved out, and he's been crashing with a friend. "Really?" I said, stirring my tea. "That's unfortunate." She studied me. "You're really not going to reach out, huh?" "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "Because I already did that once. I reached out every time he pulled away. I chased peace with someone who mistook it for boredom. I won't do that again." Mia smiled faintly. "You sound different." I thought about it for a moment. I am. Weeks later, the message that finally made me laugh wasn't from James. It was from my boss offering me an invitation to a regional leadership conference. "You're the most reliable person I've ever worked with," he'd written. Reliable. The same word James had used like an insult. Now it was praise. Funny how the same word can mean failure in one person's story and strength in another's. One evening, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found a photo strip from a college fair. James and me grinning under bright lights, his arm slung around my shoulder. On the back, in his messy handwriting, he'd written, "To my anchor." I smiled. For a long time, I thought being someone's anchor meant keeping them safe. But now I understood some people don't want anchors. They want wings, even if they fly straight into storms. And me, I wasn't built for chasing storms anymore. I was built for building peace. So I tucked the photo back into the drawer, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that I'd survived loving someone who couldn't see the value in steady hands. And I whispered almost to myself, "You can keep your dreams, James. I've finally woken up." A few days later, I opened my door to find him standing there, rain-soaked, pale and desperate. "Monica," he said quietly, "please, we need to talk." I stared at him, feeling the faint echo of the woman who once would have dropped everything just to listen. But that woman didn't live here anymore. Rain drizzled down the edge of my building, turning the city into a muted blur of reflections. I stood in the doorway, staring at James. The same man who once told me I was too safe now looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was unkempt, his clothes damp, his usual confidence replaced by something small and uncertain. "Monica," he said again, his voice low, almost pleading. "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shut the door to protect the peace I'd fought so hard to rebuild, but another part, the one that still remembered, the sound of his laugh and the warmth of his touch told me to listen, not for him, but for myself. "5 minutes," I said quietly. "That's all you get." He nodded, stepping inside. The air felt heavy between us, filled with the ghosts of things unsaid. He glanced around my apartment, the new plants on the windowsill. The yoga mat rolled in the corner, the framed certificate from my promotion on the wall. "You've changed," he murmured. "I had to," I replied simply. We sat across from each other, an invisible wall of history between us. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "I was stupid, Monica. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away." I said nothing. He continued, words tumbling out faster now. "Chloe, she wasn't what I thought. She cheated on me, used me, and when things got hard, she left. I kept thinking about you, how you stayed, how you always cared. I didn't realize how much I needed that until it was gone." His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. I folded my hands in my lap. "You didn't need me, James. You needed someone to make you feel better about yourself. There's a difference." He flinched, eyes glistening. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," I said softly. "You said I was safe and convenient. You made me feel like love should be thrilling, dangerous, unpredictable. But love isn't supposed to be a roller coaster, James. It's supposed to be steady, kind. You called me boring because you couldn't handle peace." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him. Maybe he didn't, because the Monica who once would have begged for him to stay had finally disappeared. He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm sorry. Okay, I know I hurt you, but I've changed. I see things differently now. I miss you. I miss how you made me feel safe." The irony almost made me laugh. He was using the same word, safe, the one that once shattered me now, as a plea. "You said safety was suffocating," I said quietly. "Now it's what you want." His face twisted. "Monica, please, don't do this. I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes." "Yes," I said, "but not everyone repeats them." He fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. The rain was heavier now, streaking down the windows like tears the sky refused to hold back. "Can't we just start over?" he asked finally. "We could try again. I know it won't be easy, but—" I cut him off gently. "No, James. We can't start over because I'm not the same person you left, and neither are you." He blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means you broke something in me that I had to rebuild myself, and now that I have, there's no space for you here anymore." He looked at me for a long moment as if trying to find the girl he once knew in my face. "So that's it. You're just going to throw away what we had." I almost smiled. "James, you threw it away the day you told me I wasn't enough. I'm just finally accepting that you were right, not because I lacked something, but because you didn't deserve it." His shoulders slumped. "You don't even care anymore, do you?" "I do," I said honestly. "Just not in the way you want me to. I care enough to wish you peace, but not enough to lose mine again." He stood slowly, his eyes glistening with something that looked like shame. "I thought you'd at least be angry." "I was," I admitted. "But anger fades. Self-respect doesn't." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain, steady and relentless. Finally, I stood too, walking toward the door. "You should go." He hesitated. "Can I call you sometime?" "No," I said softly, opening the door. "You can remember me if you want, but that's all." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came. He just nodded weakly and stepped out into the rain. As he walked away, I leaned against the door, closing my eyes. There was no victory in it, no satisfaction, just a deep, quiet calm. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his figure for a brief moment before the darkness swallowed him. And that was the last time I saw him. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just stood there breathing, feeling the strange lightness that comes when a story truly ends. Because peace doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it just is. After that night, life returned to a kind of stillness, not empty, but quiet in a way that felt sacred. There were no more midnight calls, no unread messages waiting for me when I woke up. The silence that used to terrify me had become something else entirely, a home I'd built for myself. In the mornings, I'd make coffee in one mug instead of two. I'd water my plants, open the window, and let the sunlight spill in. It sounds small, but those moments felt like a kind of victory, gentle, private proof that healing didn't need to be loud to be real. Work became a source of pride again. My team respected me. My boss trusted me with projects that once felt far beyond my reach. I even started mentoring a few new hires people who reminded me of the version of myself that used to apologize for taking up space. One day during a team meeting, my boss smiled and said, "Monica, you're our rock dependable, thoughtful, calm under pressure. I don't know how this place would run without you." The word dependable used to sting. It was the word James had twisted into something ugly, a synonym for boring, predictable, safe. But now sitting there surrounded by colleagues who genuinely valued me, I realized how wrong he'd been. Dependable wasn't dull, it was strong. It meant people could count on me. And for the first time in my life, that felt like power. Weeks turned into months. My world grew quietly fuller, new friends, a weekly book club, weekend hikes, and long dinners where I laughed until my cheeks hurt. There was no grand reinvention, no cinematic makeover, just me, softer, wiser, finally whole. Every now and then, I'd still see James's name pop up somewhere. A tagged photo, a mutual friend's story, his face blurred. In the background of a crowded event. I never clicked. I didn't need to. Whatever chapter he was in now, it no longer intersected with mine. Then, one ordinary Sunday morning, something unexpected happened. I met someone new. It wasn't dramatic, no lightning bolts, no whirlwind romance, just a chance encounter at the park. His name was Marcus. He tripped over his dog's leash and nearly spilled coffee on me. We both laughed, exchanged a few words, and somehow ended up sitting on a bench talking for over an hour. He was kind, thoughtful, funny in a quiet way. When I mentioned that I liked predictability, he smiled and said, "Good." The world's unpredictable enough. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't supposed to be. It was peace, simple, slow, and real. That night, I wrote in my journal something I hadn't done since before James. The words came easily, like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. Maybe love isn't supposed to make you feel alive because it's wild. Maybe it's supposed to make you feel alive because it's safe enough to rest in. As I set down my pen, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked content. Not the manic joy of chasing excitement, but a quiet steadiness, like the ocean after a storm. And I realized James had been right about one thing he wanted to feel alive. He just never understood that being alive isn't about constant motion. It's about stillness that doesn't scare you. It's the heartbeat that stays steady after the chaos ends. I'd spent years thinking I wasn't enough for someone who couldn't see beyond his own restlessness. But now I knew the truth. I wasn't too safe. I was too solid for someone who thrived on instability. That night, I stood by my balcony, the city lights stretching beneath me, and whispered softly to the wind, "You wanted to feel alive, James. So did I. I just found a better way." A small smile tugged at my lips as I closed the sliding door and turned off the light. Because I finally understood peace doesn't mean nothing happens. It means you've stopped chasing storms and started choosing calm. And for the first time since the night I walked out of his apartment,